So the other day I was speaking to Marek. He's an instructor in our study group and he gives feedback to members about their drawings. And we were talking about one particular student who's doing everything really well, like good gesture, good forms, etc. But just the proportions, she's just struggling with the proportions. And so I was like, oh, what could be like a nice tip, a little trick or something we could give her to help her with her proportions? And he very rightly replied, she probably just needs to do about 50 drawings where she just measures things. And I was like, yeah, you know, that is how I got better with my proportions, is by doing a lot of repetitions where I actually check the proportions. You know, you can measure the figure with your pencil and then check it on your drawing and sort of almost force the proportions to be right. And if you do enough repetitions of that, you are naturally going to get better at proportions intuitively, and eventually you won't need to measure all the time. But to get there, you got to do all of these repetitions. You got to go through lots of poses where you do those measurements. And that's kind of a hard thing to say to someone, because you're basically saying, hey, you're going to have to do quite a lot of work here. And if I can, I always want to give some way of making it easier or making it quicker. But sometimes it's just about the reps. So the other day I did a workshop with people, and I kept talking about reps and no one knew what I was talking about. I mean repetitions, like when you're doing push-ups. It's just like exercise. When you're doing push-ups, you go, I'm going to do 10 reps. I'm going to do 10 push-ups, 10 repetitions. And often I think with art, we think when we sit down and do a drawing, we are creating a work of art. You know, it has to look beautiful or whatever. But a lot of the time when you're doing your drawings, it's actually just getting in reps. And if you want strong arms, you wouldn't expect to get those after just doing one push-up. You would expect to have to do reps very consistently over a period of months, and then you would get those big arms. And it's the same with drawing. Now, this analogy with exercise works really well, because if you do an exercise with bad form, with bad technique, you're going to get hurt, you're going to get an injury. And if you do lots of sketching, you get a lot of reps in, but with some bad habits, you're just going to be practicing bad habits and basically reinforcing those. So what we want to do is make sure that our sketches have good basic technique, but we don't want to get so involved in the technique that each drawing takes ages and we get stuck and it's not fun, and then we're not getting our reps. So it's a balance between making sure we have some of the basic technique in place, but not getting too crazy into the technique. So here's an example. I want to work on my general sketching skills. This is a scene from a holiday in France that we had. I want to make sure I get basic perspective in here. So off this building, I want to extend these diagonals and make sure that I know roughly where the vanishing point is. And in this one, it looks like the vanishing point is on this person's head, right? Sorry to whoever this person is. And so when I'm doing the sketch, I want to make sure that the diagonals off the buildings are going to go roughly towards that person's head, to that vanishing point. And then that is also going to be where my horizon line is. So I know where the horizon line is because that is where the vanishing point is going to be. So not there, it's going to be right going across that person's head there. And so as I sketch, first I'm going to put that vanishing point, and then, so I'll show you here on the right hand side. I'm going to figure out where that point is, and then I'm going to establish the horizon line. So I just need to figure out how high up on the page the horizon line is. And then when I'm sketching in the buildings, I want to make sure those diagonals are going to the vanishing point. So it's perspective, but it's really, really simple perspective. And so I think you can do a lot of sketching with just the most basic perspective ever. Like what I just described is pretty much it. Then I want to make sure that I get things in the right size and in the right place. So when I do that, I don't want to get too crazy with it and start measuring everything intricately and perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check a couple of things. And so what I can do is I can say, well, I'm probably going to get the width of this building on the left. I'm probably going to get that wrong, right? because usually when I'm looking at something from a foreshortened angle, my brain doesn't like it and kind of tries to stretch it out. Okay, so I'm going to check how does this compare to other widths on the paper. So what I can do is I can notice that when I take this width, so this little green line is about the width of that building as I see it, it's about the same as the width between the gap between the building and the arch, and then that is about the same as the width of the sort of leg of the arch, I don't know what you call that, and that's about the same as the width of the opening of the arch. And so far we've gone 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then if we go another 2 times across, we get to the other end of the page. So the width of this building is about 1/6 of the width of the whole page, and that same length is going to get me to the arch, and then the sort of leg of the arch, and then the opening on the arch, and across to the other side. I don't want to do much more measuring than that, really. I'll check a few other things. So I'll check, like when I do this arch, I want to make sure that the sort of peak of that arch lines up with the point on the top of the arch. I might want to make sure, for example, that stuff on the buildings lines up with where the arch is. So like that point is a little bit above the top of the arch or something like that. But I don't need to get everything perfect. I just want to get things roughly in place and roughly the right size. So here's my sketch on the right-hand side. I've established that vanishing point and the horizon line. There's my perspective taken care of. I've checked that width. I'm going to make sure the diagonals go to the vanishing point on the horizon line. And then the rest is just sketching what I see. And so that's the third skill that I want to work on, is just the ability to see the abstract shapes in what I'm looking at. So like if I'm looking at these awnings, I could see this shape between them. And I want to be able to see that and draw that. Or if I'm looking at this shadow, I want to see, the shape that the shadow creates as a sort of big abstract shape. So the 3 skills were vanishing point and horizon line, tiny bit of measuring and checking that things line up, and then seeing abstract shapes and drawing those. Okay, so let's say then that we have 2 people, right? And in the beginning, they can do 1 sketch per hour, right? 1 sketch per hour. They both practice, and so they both start to improve. And every time you do a drawing, you're going to improve. One person focuses on the quality of their drawings and making their drawings look nicer and nicer. And so they're still just doing 1 drawing per hour. Every time they sit down, they do an hour session, and they're getting 1 drawing done every hour. That's great. And each time they're getting fancier. They're starting to think about the perspective of the floor tiles, and they're measuring everything more and more carefully because they're getting a little bit, more and more into it. The other person aims for the sketches to still just be sketchy, still just have basic technique, but as they get better and they get more used to it, and they'll get faster. And so they complete sketches more quickly, and so they start doing 2 sketches per hour, and then 5 sketches per hour, and then 10 sketches per hour, and then 30 sketches per hour. And you can definitely start doing completing sketches in 2 minutes. You're like, there's a kettle, sketch it. There's a car, sketch it. There's a street scene, sketch it. And you just start filling sketchbooks. In terms of just the quantity of drawings that these 2 artists are getting through, right? This one, it's like a flat line, just 1 per session. This one is like it's exponential growth. And so this person who's focusing on just filling sketchbooks with sketches that do have basic technique but nothing fancier, their progress is going to accelerate. Both of these people are going to get better, but one of them is going to have that exponential because they're filling sketchbooks. So the first hard truth is, sometimes you'll be on the right track, doing the right things, but you just got to do a ton more drawing, a lot more sketching, and you want to get in as many reps as you can. Now, the second hard truth is that to take a step forward sometimes, you first have to take a step back right? One step back, then two forwards. In other words, your drawings and paintings are often going to have to look worse if you're trying to take a step forward and learn something new. So I want to show you guys my progression with landscapes, right? Normally this is all about figures on this channel, but I really like landscapes and painting scenes and things like that as well, not just figures. So here is, you know, how I was drawing and painting a landscape in my early 30s. All through my 20s, I had a weird mindset, not a weird, very common actually, but an unproductive mindset about art, which was I resisted the idea that I should learn skills and do exercises. Now I had a lot of excuses for that. I thought, oh no, art should be more expressive. It shouldn't be about exercises and things like that. The reality was I just didn't want to do the exercises because they sounded like too much hard work, right? And so, but then the result was I wouldn't improve, I'd get frustrated and I'd quit. Once I started to do the exercises, art became so much more fun. Once you can actually create things that you want to create and express yourself because you have the skills to do it, that's when it becomes extremely fun and expressive. But you got to go get the skills before that's going to happen. So anyway, up until this point, I'd basically been spinning my wheels and not getting anywhere, right? So then I start to try and work on my skills and I start to try to think about value. How do you understand the light and dark? And in the beginning, I really didn't understand it. I mean, I think you could say that my efforts here were in some ways actually getting worse in terms of how they looked. And then I kept going and I don't really think they started to look all that much better. I did so many of these value studies. My painting teacher, Jared, would set this exercise for me with these value studies and I would do it. And then he'd be like, yeah, you know, you've overcomplicated the values. That's okay. He's very patient. That's okay. We want to simplify it this way. And I would do it again. He's like, yeah, you know, you've overcomplicated this. Remember, you're going to do it like this, this, and this. Simplify it in this way. And I'd go away. And it was like hitting my head against a brick wall. And I would say to him, this feels like hitting my head against a brick wall here. And he would say, yeah, you know, sometimes learning to draw and paint feels like that. And with his encouragement, I would keep going. And eventually I kind of started to get it. I kind of started to learn to squint, simplify the values. And I kind of started to get it, especially something that helped me was doing it digitally because then I wasn't thinking about how to use the material as well. So I started to kind of get it with digital stuff. And then I wanted to introduce color. Right? I was like, okay, I'm kind of getting value sometimes. I want to start to introduce color. So I started to introduce color and it was like back to square one. It started to look worse again. I'd taken a step back. So instead of giving up on that, I kept going and then it was like, oh, okay, I can start to paint with values and introduce color and it kind of looks okay. Great. But you know what? I love digital painting, but my original goal was to paint in traditional media. I wanted to get into stuff like watercolor or gouache and stuff like that. So I went back to watercolor and it was like, oh man, step back again, frustrating, really tempting to just stick to the digital, which is what I'd gotten used to. But it's like, no, it's okay. This is just the step back. And then I'm going to do the reps and I'm going to take 2 steps forwards. It's okay. Keep going. And then eventually I'm getting to and still I'm not there yet, but I'm getting to the watercolor paintings that I want to be able to produce. And it's the same story with figures, right? The reps and the 1 step back to take 2 steps forwards. Same story, right? And I'm a bit further back on the pathway with the landscapes and the paintings and stuff. But I'm on that path with that as well. I can't even tell you how fun it is. If you can have that learner mindset and kind of drop I don't know if it's ego or what, but be okay with producing stuff that doesn't look good, even though you know you can do better, because you're learning something. And so you can take one step back and take 2 steps forwards. And then if you can get in the reps and just do that volume, you're really going to get to where you want to go. And man, it is absolutely going to be worth it. And it's going to be all the more satisfying because of the work and effort that you put into it. So I really, really would recommend this approach. Now, these ideas that I've talked about, the essential techniques without getting bogged down in technique, finding ways to stay consistent and keep getting in sketches, and taking steps back in what you're learning in order to be able to take leaps forward by taking on new topics and skills. This is how our study group is set up. So if you would like to progress your figure drawings in particular, then check out our Life Drawing Study Group. We have our Figure Foundations course, which is completely focused on the few essential things that make all the difference to your figures. Once you have those fundamental ideas in place through our course, then you're just going to need to get in a lot of reps, a lot of poses, and your figure drawings will absolutely skyrocket. We have seen it in the study group over and over again. It really, really works. So check out the link below. And in the meantime, there's another video up on the screen, which is going to introduce you to the essentials of figure drawing. So you can check that out as well.